Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of DGS. Baroque seems to have some evidence. Oh, sorry. Hold on just a second. I lost the screen. Anyway, Baroque has evidence to show that the small box was not stolen from the pawn shop, and he's about to present it just now.
What?
Detective Gregson, present that photo.
Sir, right away.
Photo? Of course he pocketed that.
It's one taken by the photo machine installed in the pawn shop by that detective. Holmesy.
As indicated on the rough sketch of the inside of the shop that was presented earlier, there are two photo machines installed in the victim's shop. One pointed toward where shopkeep Hatch stood and received customers, and one pointed toward the shelves lined with unredeemed pawn items.
According to this claim ticket, Mangadol's small box became an unredeemed pawn item 2 days before the murder on April 13th at 9 a.m. As soon as it became an unredeemed pawn item, this small box would have been put on the shelf with the other unredeemed pawn items. And 2 hours before the murder occurred, this photo from 11 p.m. on April 15th was taken. Here it is. Well, there certainly are a lot of unredeemed pawn items crammed onto these shelves, aren't there? Then there was this photo. This photo was taken after the murder at 2 a.m. Then we ought to compare the two photos. Even if we were to put them side by side, it's not that clear. My eyes have gone out of focus. To be sure, nothing was stolen the night the victim was murdered. Scotland Yard investigated the possibility. So you've already investigated these two photos carefully, correct? Yes, Your Honor. After counting all the unredeemed pawn items shown in both photos, the number is exactly the same. That was the Yard's conclusion.
That means that nothing was stolen from the pawn shop that night. This Japanese boy's claim is nothing but speculation.
Gah!
Damn it, I was so close. If only there were a way to prove that something he left behind when he died had been stolen. I'd be able to corner that guy.
Say, Naruto-kun. I just had a thought. Those two photos. Are they really exactly the same?
Maybe nothing was stolen, something must have shifted.
Now then, defense, let me confirm one final thing with you. On the night of the murder, nothing was stolen from the pawn shop. Do you acknowledge that?
What is it about these two photos? Is there really not a single discrepancy between them? There are no discrepancies. Point out a discrepancy. Use evidence? Use evidence. Before I answer that, there's one thing I'd like to try.
What do you mean, try?
In order to do so, I would need to use a certain piece of evidence.
I'm not really sure what you're getting at. What evidence is necessary to confirm whether there are no discrepancies between these photos?
Where's the stereoscope? I'd like to use this one last time and try looking at the two photos in 3D.
Oh! It seems you finally come over to my side. You show real stereoscopic promise.
I had a feeling he'd say something like that.
Now then, Naruto-kun, let's put this little guy to use one more time and check things out, okay? Here are the two photos. Now here we go.
So if you guys are doing it, I'll give you guys a second to do it. What you're looking for is something floating, obviously. And if you look down in the bottom little cubby on the right side, lower right, third row, you'll notice that there is a box that has been shifted. I wonder if that might be the case. I was right. There's an obvious discrepancy between these two photos. What?
In that case, the defense will point it out. What is the obvious discrepancy between the photos?
I appreciate this game points it out for you, in case you're having trouble doing the 3D crap. It's true that these two photos... Oh my god. Alright, sorry about that. Background noises. Anyway, it's true that these two photos are almost exactly the same. There's just one thing that's different.
What?
When you look at these two photos in 3D, this single, small box stands out from everything else. Ridiculous. Oh my god, there's like a thing that he's looking at.
It's true. The box stands out.
In other words, there's only one conclusion we can draw. Mr. Mangadol's small box wasn't stolen that night. However, someone picked up that box and put it carefully back where it had been.
So then, this small box that Mr. Mangodol pawned.
It can only be the one that stands out in this photo. How utterly pointless. So what if it is? Moving something isn't the same as stealing it. It changes absolutely nothing about the circumstances on the night of the murder. Well, that's true, but... He has a point. That item Mr. Mangadol left behind after his death wasn't stolen. It was only moved a little. Does that mean the circumstances really haven't changed? They haven't changed, they changed majorly. They've changed majorly. I would say the circumstances have changed majorly, wouldn't you? What do you mean? The issue is that that's a small box. So naturally, there was likely something inside it, correct? What? The small box shown in this photo needs to be examined immediately. It should still be on the shelf at Hatchon's shop. That's not necessary. The small box left behind by some person who died 2 months ago has nothing to do with this case.
Overruled, Lord Von Zeeks. Bailiff, set off for the crime scene at once. Retrieve the small box in question and check its contents.
Intense staring. How much of this case do we still have left? I'm actually curious. I mean, we're getting close, but it might actually go on for a little longer because Egg does not like to be straight with us.
We will likely receive word within the next 30 minutes. Until the evidence arrives, the trial will be briefly put on hold. Again.
I never dreamed I would be made to suffer through such a pointless farce for so long.
What?
This is nothing more than one of the diversions that the Japanese are so gifted at. What do you mean? That exchange student there has been deciding all sorts of things for us from the very beginning. This witness attempted to steal some pawned items, for instance. But if you consider it logically, there's no way it's worth enough to justify stealing it.
Precisely. I wouldn't go to the trouble of breaking and entering for something so trivial.
Is it trivial, though? 2 months ago, Mr. Mangadol lost his life immediately after the trial's conclusion. However, the verdict was not guilty. In other words, it was completely proven. Mr. Mangadol was an innocent, upstanding citizen. That makes me uncomfortable. Was it not you yourself who prevented that, exchange student?
Upstanding citizens pawn things every day. A black coat with a disc in the pocket. A trifling little box. I wouldn't take those things even if they were offered freely to me.
Actually, now that he mentions it, that's true.
Master Megandal was quite wealthy. I could understand if it were a jewel or a stack of cash.
No, there's no way he'd have pawned a stack of cash. I can say that with certainty.
The prosecution assertion certainly does make sense.
The defense needs to provide definite proof. Proof of how much significance this pawn item left behind by an upstanding citizen holds. Shit, I think this is where we have to reveal that we gave a false verdict.
Your thoughts, defense. Do you have anything to present? The court would like to hear your basis for claiming that the disc and the small box have some significance in this case.
Well... yeah, here we go.
What's wrong, Naruhodo-kun? I mean, it's pretty clear, right? They're both pretty important pieces of evidence.
Of course, we're highly aware of Mangadol's true nature, and about that disc too. But if I make the circumstances clear now, we'll have to admit that the not guilty verdict from 2 months ago was a false verdict due to the defense's dishonest tactics. And the court will have to recognize Gina-san's false testimony too.
Oh no!
What if Prosecutor Von Zeeks said that because he could foresee how everything would turn out?
But this might actually be a good opportunity.
What do you mean, Iris-chan?
I mean, aren't you always saying? The truth will always make itself known at some point.
What was the significance of the items Mangadol had held at Hatch-san's shop? The only one who can testify about that is Gina-san. But a testimony like that might end up putting us at an unsurmountable disadvantage. Should I have Gina-san testify? We don't have a choice at this point. Request testimony? Forget it. Request. Your Honor, there's one thing the defense would like to propose.
What's that, defense?
While we wait for Mr. Mangadol's small box to arrive at the courthouse, the defense would like to hear the testimony of the defendant, Gina Lestrade.
The defendant? To what end?
Gina Lestrade knows the circumstances behind Mr. Mangadol's pawning of those items. If we could hear what she has to say, I'm sure you'd all understand just how important these pieces of evidence are. Oh? Now this is very interesting. Surely you must understand, right? That testimony has a considerable significance to both the defendant and you yourself. Yes.
Lord Von Zeeks? What did you mean by that last statement?
The prosecution would like to accept the defense's proposal. For the time being, let's suspend this witness's testimony and hear from the defendant.
Very well. The court will allow it. We will now hear the defendant's testimony. The witnesses will withdraw to the lobby and await further instruction.
Well then, I will be taking my leave. One moment, please. You'd best remain on the stand and listen to the defendant's testimony. Very well. Gina-san's testimony. Please, just find a way to trust me.
Naruto-kun.
Sorry, Gina. Mr. Mangodoll left several items at Mr. Hatch's pawn shop when he died. And those items are inextricably connected to the murder that occurred 2 months ago.
As I recall, this girl took the witness stand during that trial, didn't she?
Yes. Her testimony established the innocence of the defendant, Mr. Mangodoll. The circumstances behind that murder 2 months ago were rather intriguing. To think we would be meeting someone involved in that trial again in this very same room. Perhaps this is also some incarnation of fate, Japanese boy. Deep breaths. 2 months ago, a mason was stabbed to death on the moving omnibus in the dead of winter. The only other person in the carriage besides the victim was Mr. Mangodoll. Naturally, Mr. Mangodoll was assumed to be the killer, but as the trial progressed, a new possibility came to light. That the crime had taken place on the omnibus's upper deck. And after his death, the victim was dropped into the carriage through the skylight. The key testimony was provided by Gina Lestrade. Gina-san had been hiding in the carriage at the time, in order to target the carriage's passengers for pickpocketing. And Mr. Mangodoll, after receiving his not guilty verdict, died a mysterious death there in the courthouse, right after this trial. It has been 2 months since then, but the case still hasn't been solved. Neither the murder on the omnibus, nor the mysterious fire.
However, during that trial, I don't believe anything was mentioned about the defendant's disc or small box.
Gina-san. Will you please tell us, right here, right now, what really happened in the murder 2 months ago? How should I know? I mean, I already told you all there was to tell. But you told us yesterday at the detention center. Please, it's very important.
But
if by chance you intentionally hid something during that trial 2 months ago, naturally we'll have to charge you with perjury. And you will lose your value as a witness. Well, to be honest, I don't think you had much value to begin with, but...
That's not nice! Genie! Please, just trust Naruto-kun.
Iris,
We're on your side.
fine. I'll talk. Gina-san. It seems that the defense is prepared to smash everything with its own hand that it has built.
I can't pretend to understand what's going on here, but there seems to be some sort of secret concerning the items Mr. Mangodoll left behind after his death, and the murder from 2 months ago. Now then, the court would like to hear the witness's testimony about the murder 2 months ago, and the untold truth behind it.
Everything is about to come out into the open, right now, in this trial. Just like Prosecutor Von Zeke said. As a defense attorney, my only choice is to prepare myself. Rip everything! Here we go! Nail in our death tomb. The truth about 2 months ago. That night, the victim really did ride in the carriage of the omnibus. When I was dragged out into the carriage, I saw that disc lying on the floor. There was a scream from the other side of the skylight, and those 2 passengers went to call the police. While they were gone, that guy paid the driver to go to the nearby pawn shop. threatened me, told me not to talk about what I'd seen or heard.
What is the meaning of this witness's testimony? It sounds very different from what was said in the trial 2 months ago.
Precisely.
It's almost as if the verdict issued to Mr. Mangeldal was incorrect, and Mr. Mangeldal himself intentionally manipulated the court. We must consider this a terrible conspiracy.
There's no doubt that the trial 2 months ago was unjust. A result of the unexcusable actions of the defendant, the witness, and the defense attorney. What's going on here?
Everything about that trial was lies and plots. Mangeldal and that witness and that Japanese defense attorney were all in cahoots. No! Naruhodo, the defense attorney, had no idea!
Don't be ridiculous!
He didn't know. That doesn't excuse anything.
How dreadful. Devilish lies ending in a not guilty verdict.
We mustn't let him off the hook. No, we certainly must not.
Can I just say I really appreciate the fact that Gina defended Naruhodo? I admit that we, the defendant's team, committed an inexcusable atrocity. We intend to accept the full blame for our actions. However, after hearing this testimony, everyone should realize just how vital those items that Mr. Mangeldal left behind after his death really are. Very well, exchange student. If you're that determined to bring these facts to our attention, it is our duty to listen.
I must say, the circumstances here are incredibly regrettable. Mr. Naruhodo.
Yes!
The penalty that will be brought against you will be deliberated after the conclusion of this trial.
Understood.
Naruhodo. Now then, you will conduct your cross-examination.
Alright, let's get to work. I think we're skipping this first statement, aren't we? Why is like Rupert's back to us? Hold on a second. The disc you say you saw at that time, was it this one? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. It was lying on the floor right next to the dead man.
Did that disc belong to the victim, perhaps?
The guy snatched it up and stuffed it in his coat. What are these two doing? What are these? Is everything alright, Detective? Cloud-Gray-san. You know what's really amazing? They didn't react to anything at all. They're just doing their own thing. And it's one of those things you have to actually notice it's going on while you're listening to the testimony. That's amazing. Detective Gregson! Cloud-Gray-san! What do you want? Don't startle me like that! It looked like you two were whispering about something just now. Were you consulting him about something?
Consulting? Don't be ridiculous! I have nothing to talk to this shady character about.
And I have nothing to say to a detective who goes around confiscating people's pawn items. Those two have been whispering to each other throughout the whole cross-examination. It's almost like they're conducting some sort of business transaction or something. Did anyone see what they were doing?
You will refrain from personal conversation during the witness's testimony. My deepest apologies, Your Honor.
They were definitely discussing something.
Now then, witness, you may continue your testimony.
When you say a nearby pawn shop, you must mean Hatch-san's.
Just a moment now. So then you can't mean that driver gave false testimony too.
At the very least, he failed to mention anything about the pawn shop while he was on the stand.
What is this world coming to?
That guy took off the black coat he was wearing and gave it to the driver. It was an expensive coat, and he folded it carefully before handing it over. Seeing that, I got the distinct impression that the thing he was leaving at the pawn shop was something incredibly valuable. Come to think of it, Gina-san was trying to demand a high price for that disc, wasn't she? She bickered with Hatch-san on the day of the murder about how it should be worth more. Once the driver had taken the guy's money, he ran happily to the pawn shop. That's when that guy called to me. "Get out of the carriage," he said. You were threatened. If I did what he said, he'd let me escape. That's what he said. And that's the reason you gave false testimony in the trial 2 months ago, little pickpocket. That and one other thing. He ordered me to do something. Which was? He told me to hold on to the claim ticket the driver would bring back and not lose it.
The claim ticket?
And if in 2 months he didn't show up to get it, I was to go to the pawn shop, pay the interest, and extend the holding period. And he gave me money for that.
But why would Mr. Mango Doll do such a thing? Pawning a coat before the police could arrive.
There's only one reason I can think of. Mango Doll didn't want the police to know what he had taken to the pawn shop. They were important items that he had to hide at any cost. Then he let me escape. I'm surprised. Gina-san's really telling the truth.
Jeannie trusts you, not Hoda-kun.
After the trial, she'll be charged with perjury, though. For now, I'll try to drag out any little piece of information I can.
Alright, then don't hold back and press every detail.
And you were hiding in the carriage at the time, right? As I recall, you were in the compartment under the seat, right? Yeah, it was pitch black and I couldn't see what was going on in the carriage.
I believe you testified to a certain fact 2 months ago. The only passenger in the carriage was Mr. Mango Doll.
That means that statement was a lie. I was told to say that in my testimony by Mango Doll. In any case, please tell us the truth this time. Were Mr. Mango Doll and the victim acquaintances? I'm not sure, but I heard some kind of whispering back and forth to each other for quite a while. What were they talking about? I couldn't hear very well, but it kinda seemed like they might have been talking about money. Something about buy or won't buy.
It sounds like they were having some sort of business transaction.
They gradually got louder and louder until it was basically a full-blown argument. I was scared, so I held my breath. And that's when suddenly there was a loud noise like somebody's body hitting the floor.
As I recall, you screamed instinctively, correct?
Yeah. Then that Mango Doll guy found me. See if I can finish this testimony before I end the video. The disc you say you saw at the time, was it this one? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. It was lying on the floor right next to the dead man.
Did that disc belong to the victim, perhaps?
That guy snatched it up and stuffed it into his coat. Then he made me sit in the seat across from him. What did Mr. Mango Doll say to you? He told me not to breathe a word to anyone about what I'd seen or heard. Or about the disc. I was afraid of the look in his eyes. If I didn't agree, maybe I'd be stabbed too. Then he started asking me a bunch of questions about myself, my name and where I lived, and about being a pickpocket. And that was when the murder that had happened in the carriage was discovered, right? Yeah, there was a rattling noise above our heads. The omnibus has an upper deck, and there were 2 passengers riding up there, right? Yeah. Those 2 noticed the murder from the other side of the skylight and screamed. The driver hurriedly stopped the carriage, and Mangodal hid me.
He hid you?
He shoved me back into the compartment under the seat where he found me. When the carriage stopped, the 2 passengers who'd been riding on the upper deck ran to get the police. It sounds as though those 2 passengers were unrelated to the murder after all. So then, it was Mangodal, the driver, and you left behind at the scene of the crime, right? Yeah, well, I was hidden in the compartment, but when the carriage door opened, I feel like I could hear voices talking outside.
The driver appeared in court as a witness 2 months ago, as I recall. I believe his name was Mr. Beppo.
What were the 2 of them talking about? I don't know anything about it, or something. That's what I heard them talking about.
I believe that's enough. The truth behind the murder from 2 months ago has finally come to light.
2 months ago, a certain transaction took place on the omnibus. A negotiation concerning this disc, but apparently it didn't go well. Before an agreement on price could be reached, Mangodal stole it, employing a fearsome means that also robbed his business partner of his life. In other words, this disc was important enough to be worth that. I still have no idea what that means, though. Then, 2 months went by, and 2 days ago, when this murder occurred, was the precise day that Mangodal was due to pick up his pawn item. I couldn't decide what to do with that claim check. I mean, I knew the guy died after that trial. So in the end, you decided to claim those pawn items as your own. They were going to be sold either way, so I might as well take them, right? That's all I was thinking, and who could blame me, right?
Mr. Mangodal was trying to get his hands on this disc until the moment he killed his partner. Do you know why that was?
How should I know? I figured it'd be really valuable and thought maybe I could sell it for a lot of money. That's all I was thinking. And who could blame me, right? Your Honor! The bailiff who was dispatched to the crime scene just returned with new evidence. Oh, there's a to be continued coming here, so I guess I will stop when we get to that to be continued. The mysterious small box that Mangodal had pawned 2 months ago. I'm sure it has some important role in this case. We're gonna figure out what's up with that small box. I'm pretty sure, since we have a music box, we have a disc that plays music. That box is probably a music box disc. But anyway, to be continued, we shall go into that small box in the next video, so I'll see you guys then. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of DGS. Baroque seems to have some evidence. Oh, sorry. Hold on just a second. I lost the screen. Anyway, wait. Baroque has evidence to show that the small box was not stolen from the pawn shop, and he's about to present it just now. Eh?
What?
Detective Gregson, present that photo.
Sir, right away.
Photo? Of course he pocketed that.
It's one taken by the photo machine installed in the pawn shop by that detective. Holmesy.
As indicated on the rough sketch of the inside of the shop that was presented earlier. There are 2 photo machines installed in the victim's shop. One pointed toward where shopkeep Hatch stood and received customers, and one pointed toward the shelves lined with unredeemed pawn items.
According to this claim ticket, Mangadal.
I wonder if that might be the case. I was right. There's an obvious discrepancy between these 2 photos. What?
In that case, the defense will point it out. What is the obvious discrepancy between the photos?
I appreciate this game points it out for you, in case you're having trouble doing the 3D crap. It's true that these 2 photos... Oh my god. Alright, sorry about that. Background noises. Anyway, it's true that these 2 photos are almost exactly the same. There's just one thing that's different.
What?
When you look at these 2 photos in 3D, this single, small box stands out from everything else. Ridiculous.
The number is exactly the same. That was the Yard's conclusion.
That means that nothing was stolen from the pawn shop that night. This Japanese boy's claim is nothing but speculation.
Gah!
Damn it. I was so close. If only there were a way to prove that something he left behind when he died had been stolen. I'd be able to corner that guy.
Say, Naruto-kun. I just had a thought. Those 2 photos. Are they really exactly the same?
Maybe nothing was stolen, something must have shifted.
Now then, defense, let me confirm one final thing with you. On the night of the murder, nothing was stolen from the pawn shop. Do you acknowledge that?
What is it about these 2 photos? Is there really not a single discrepancy between them? There are no discrepancies. Point out a discrepancy. Use evidence? Use evidence. Before I answer that, there's one thing I'd like to try.
What do you mean, try?
In order to do so, I would need to use a certain piece of evidence.
I'm not really sure what you're getting at. What evidence is necessary to confirm whether there are no discrepancies between these photos?
Where's the stereoscope? I'd like to use this one last time and try looking at the 2 photos in 3D.
Oh! It seems you finally come over to my side. You show real stereoscopic promise.
I had a feeling he'd say something like that.
Now then, Naruto-kun, let's put this little guy to use one more time and check things out, okay? Here are the 2 photos. Now here we go.
So if you guys are doing it, I'll give you guys a second to do it. What you're looking for is something floating, obviously. And if you look down in the bottom little cubby on the right side, lower right, 3rd row, you'll notice that there is a box that has been shifted.
Small box became an unredeemed pawn item 2 days before the murder on April 13th at 9 a.m. As soon as it became an unredeemed pawn item, this small box would have been put on the shelf with the other unredeemed pawn items. And 2 hours before the murder occurred, this photo from 11 p.m. on April 15th was taken. Here it is.
Well, there certainly are a lot of unredeemed pawn items crammed onto these shelves, aren't there? Then there was this photo. This photo was taken after the murder at 2 a.m. Then we ought to compare the two photos. Even if we were to put them side by side, it's not that clear. Ugh, my eyes have gone out of focus. To be sure, nothing was stolen the night the victim was murdered. Scotland Yard investigated the possibility.
So you've already investigated these two photos carefully, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. After counting all the unredeemed pawn items shown in both photos,